1.0 with Bobby Lee and Jacob Hoffman.
Welcome to 1.0. My name is Bobby Lee, and today we have with us a very special guest. He is a master of martial arts, a part of pop culture phenomena that is Mortal Kombat, and this man has over 40 years performance experience, Mr. Daniel Pesina. Also joining us this evening is my friend and colleague Jacob Hoffman, a man in development of his first comic book, The Artemis Project, and he's a very long combat fan. We hope you enjoy the show today as we delve into the backstory of Mortal Kombat, the many roles that Master Pesina had a hand in, and what the future holds in store.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Hey, no problem. We're happy to have you. I think Jacob might have had a question for you. I really like this question. We were talking about it earlier, so Jake, you want to take it away?
Yeah, for sure. So we were trying to figure out what the best line of questions would be and the direction we'd be going at this point. And I had remembered John Tobias had discussed a long time ago about the development of Mortal Kombat starting from an original pitch from the producers of Universal Soldier. And then they kind of dropped that and moved on to Jean-Claude Van Damme as who he was, and I guess Kumite and Bloodsport at that time. And then you're here. And Mortal Kombat kind of went from there. I was curious about how early on in the development you were a part of it, whether you had any hand to play in that progression from the original concept design to what eventually became Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, actually, I was on the original pitch to Ed Boon to hear about the fighting game. So I knew John since we were kids. We used to play Dungeons and Dragons together when we were younger and watch kung fu movies, or actually, science fiction movie. So we kind of hung out for a while. And then later on, he gave me a call and he asked if I would help him. He had a concept for a fighting game. So we snuck into Midway at about 10:30 at night because he didn't want anyone else to know it. It was just myself, John, my brother Carlos, and Rich, who knew about, trying to develop this fighting game. So we snuck in, we made some videotapes and stuff like that of movement, and then we presented that idea to Ed. And originally, I think this is about the part when, what you said, Universal Soldier and Jean-Claude Van Damme came in, because Ed actually said no. He really didn't like the idea. He said he liked our idea of a fighting game, like a realistic fighting game, but he didn't think that, we didn't have a name for the project, but he didn't think what we know as Mortal Kombat would be a good idea. So he originally turned it down. So,
neat.
Yeah, so then he thought it'd be better to, take our idea and give it to Jean-Claude Van Damme, which I wasn't really happy about, because at that point, I insisted that like the ninjas be Lin Kuei. So I told John that if they were not Lin Kuei, I wouldn't work on the project, because I wanted us to do like not a mainstream fighting game. I wanted us to do like a geeky creative fighting game, which it turned out to be. But yeah, so then things fell through with Jean-Claude Van Damme, and later on, Rich DIVIZIO, Kano, started calling John up and saying, hey, why don't we do our original idea? So Rich bugged him for about 2 or 3 weeks, calling him 2-3 times a day, and John was like, okay, I'm going to go ask Ed. So Ed was like, okay, you guys, we'll do a filler game. So, you guys work on it, and then I'll help you guys when you guys need it. So John and I shot about 3 or 4 days, 8 hours a day of martial art moves, trying to figure out what would work, in this game.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Wow. What's interesting about all that to me is, how did you guys come to know Ed? Did John know him before you, or?
Yeah, Ed was like the boss of his last project. I forget what game it was. So he was he's like a team leader, head of a team.
Mm-hmm.
So and
so more or less
John,
like he's
John,
in right now.
Well, yeah, now he's bigger. But
Well, of
so,
course he is.
yeah. But it was just so he John already worked for Midway, and they did a game together, and they were going to do, you know, they were like, oh, what's our next game? And he's like, let me think of something. So, you know, really, John, he's a genius, man. He thought all this stuff up.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I never knew he was involved with him before Mortal Kombat, anyways.
When you were shooting these things way back when, I was about 8 or 9 years old. And even though I'm kind of doing my own comic book now, it wasn't that. I was just always in love with fiction. John was such an idol for me growing up at that time. Now when I look back on it, especially with the Johnny Cage character, I remember thinking as a kid, I don't know how he plays into this, but now it's so interesting because it's almost very meta, right? It's this fictional world filled with larger-than-life characters, and suddenly there's Johnny Cage, and as larger-than-life as he is, it's almost a funny sort of commentary on it because he's an actor presented in this world that it's not real to us, but it's real in his world, and he's the phony. So it's just really interesting to me. How did you go about developing that, or how did you and John come to that?
Well, most of the characters, like Johnny Cage, is actually modeled off of Daniel Rad from Iron Fist. Later on, when the company sees the idea and sees most of the credit, they kind of cut us out of it. Like the people who didn't work for Midway, they kind of cut us out of the, you know, kind of excluded us from taking credit for the game. But originally, Johnny Cage is modeled after Daniel Rad from Iron Fist. So that's where we got the actor type, because that's Iron Fist. He's an actor, he's a rich guy, and he studied, you know, Kung Fu. And a lot of our characters are inspired by that comic book. If you really look at if you really look at Jax, he's Luke Cage, and that's again, he appeared in Iron Fist. Sonya is a character that was in one of the Iron Fist comics. So is if you look at Liu Kang from number 2, he's dressed exactly like Shang-Chi, master of Kung Fu. So we got a lot of ideas, like for the John got a lot of ideas, like from this, you know, Marvel comic called Iron Fist. So it's pretty funny because now, you know, Warner Brothers owns DC, you know, and MK is one of the biggest franchises, but it's really modeled after Marvel.
So it's a quasi sort of knockoff Marvel against DC. That's quite hilarious. What about
So it is a cross. It's a crossover. Yeah.
How about your boy in blue and yellow? When it comes to him, or I guess they're two characters, but Scorpion and Sub-Zero, how do they kind of fall into the mix of that, along with Goro and Shang Tsung?
Well, a lot of the personalities were developed. A lot of the story and personalities were developed while we filmed. It wasn't like anything was really pre-planned because it was only originally we signed on to do 200 arcade games, so it was never going to be really, really big. But you know, us four were going to make it as awesome as we could. So I insisted that the ninjas be Lin Kuei. So when we were filming them, beginning to film Scorpion, when you play D&D, you harp on the dungeon master, like harps on you, and you're bickering with your fellow, your fellow characters, and we took that. So our whole growing up, we did that. You know, John, myself, Carlos, Rich, sometimes Tony Marquez, Kung Lao would show up, or sometimes the guy who did Liu Kang would show up. So we all knew each other way before. So we're filming the ninjas, and my brother and I started kind of bickering with John over stuff, just to give him a hard time. So John was just like, you know what? I'm going to make these ninjas brothers. And one ninja kills the other ninja for killing his father. So that story of Sub-Zero and Scorpion is really like a throw at myself and my brother Carlos.
Huh, that's
because
so cool.
because we'd be fucking around. He'd be like, okay, guys, you know, John's always like, when it's time to work, he's the serious one. So me and Carlos were just goofing around, harping on him, making jokes, not really getting work done, just kind of, we were working on it, but we were giving him a hard time. And then to get back at us, he made the storyline that, Sub-Zero and Scorpion, are mortal enemies, which is not anything like my brother and I in real life, but that's how that developed. So a lot of the stories developed while we were filming.
That's really neat.
A question I have for you about Mortal Kombat 1 is, was Stryker originally set to appear on the original roster of Mortal Kombat 1?
I was going to be Stryker. So I wanted to be the Daniel Rad character really bad because I love I have the comics. So, but John was just like, again, because we were always bickering, John is like, no, I'm going to make you Stryker, the cop. And I was like, no way, I don't want to be Stryker. He is like the plainest guy. You know what? Just from us talking and developing, I'm like, oh no, he's like that. He's like, no, I'm going to make you do that because guess what? That's what you're going to do. You're going to do it. And that's that's again how we would harp on each other and stuff like that. So originally I was going to do the Stryker, but then
spoiler.
Yeah, but then,
spoiler. He still is pretty lame.
yeah, he is. Tony. Man, I forget. Kung Lao calls him. Man, I forget. I'll try to think of what he always calls him, that character, because it's like it is the lamest character. But he's just like,
they should have just called him Curtis.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, originally I was going to do that, and then we were like, John was like, well, I didn't have time to go get the costume. What do you have that would make, you look like, this Iron Fist character? And I was like, well, I could wear black spandex. I have, black shoes. I could go shirtless. And he's like, oh, yeah, cool. And he's like, get a sash from home, and wear like a red sash to have some color in the character. I was like, okay, cool. So I just showed up with stuff I had at home, and we started filming.
Wow. Cool.
Yeah.
So that's really amazing. That's more information than I ever knew, and I was trying to research this a little bit, and along with Bobby, to try to get a better understanding of history. We've been following it ever since we were kids, but this is all brand new, and this is great.
Yeah. Again, when the company seized it, when Winway seized control of the game, I think they tried to bury a lot of the history to make it look like, John and Ed came up with it. And really, John is
that's all it is.
Really, John came up with it. And Ed was, Ed, like I said, Ed said no. So, so later on, about he helped us as far as like he would just, when we were filming, after we filmed like 4 days, he was like, okay. And then he kind of explained to me like what was going on with like the production side. He was like, okay, our movements has to hit a hitbox, and we have to have like bigger movement because John and I, when we were filming, we were trying to make it like realistic, so it would like look like, it just didn't transfer well to the technology back then. So John, so Ed showed us like, bigger movement. Here's the hitboxes. They're going to be here and here. So try to do that, and then he would just leave us alone, and we would start creating stuff. So after the game tested really well in Midway, is when then he really jumped on board. Up to then he didn't really give any ideas. Yeah. And then for our fourth character, after everybody's like, oh my God, you guys are like really, this game is going to be so awesome. It's so cool. So that's when him and the company started being like, oh, we got to, I think they planned on inserting Ed in there so that the company would get credit for it. Because again, I didn't, me, my brother Carlos or Rich didn't work for Midway.
Mm-hmm.
So I think
you were contracted.
Yeah. Contracted for 200. We were contracted for 200 video games, arcade games.
That's
what our contract
like,
said. Yeah.
Okay. What games? I mean, did they just not manifest, or was there seriously a whole lack of them we had no idea about?
No. Meaning like there was only going to be 200 Mortal Kombat cabinets made.
Oh, yeah, that changed.
Yeah, that changed by a lot. Yeah, and when I think it's a big company, so when they saw money, they were like they wanted to hold on to most of it, I guess.
Yeah, it's the story of the modern age, really.
Yeah.
But Bobby, you had some questions actually regarding this. I'm sorry I kind of lost track, but there was something about the development you had wanted to ask earlier.
Oh, to be honest, I don't really remember, but I did know if there was any other character set that appeared in Mortal Kombat 1 that later appeared in games.
I guess.
Well, in 1 we wanted Jax. We didn't want 2 ninjas. We only wanted 1 ninja, and we wanted to shoot Jax. And that didn't happen. The time constraint and technology. Just I shot enough. After we had the idea, we were in crunch time, and they're like, oh, the ninjas would be the easiest to duplicate. So I spent 2 days shooting 5 or 6 different ninjas, which eventually that's why they came up with that's when they embraced the idea of a secret character. When we were filming Raiden, Rich and Carlos started goofing around and saying oh, what'd be really cool if it was a secret that you could put in this, and then Raiden and Kano would tag team people. It'd be like a secret, characters to have a tag team against the one guy. So, that idea came out, relatively early. I understand that they have tag teams now, or had tag teams, or where you can fight 2 people at once, I guess, or change over at one, kind of one person fights and then the other person fights.
Yeah.
In one of the games, yeah. So that was, we had so many ideas for the first Mortal Kombat 1 that they're still using the ideas today.
Really?
I seen 9 and 10, and I'm I start smiling because I was like, oh, I came up with that idea in 1, but we couldn't do that.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for co-op fatalities.
Yes, it was good because us being friends, we just would take the best idea or add to an idea that we had.
Mm-hmm.
So another good example is, they do the Get Over Here. That is actually Ed mimicking Rich, who came up with that idea in that voice.
Really? Okay, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. When we were filming, originally Ed, that was I think Ed's first idea. Presented a first idea about Scorpion having a lasso like a cowboy. And I was supposed to. He wanted me to go over my head and then swing it and then pull the guy over, kind of hand over hand, pull it over. And then I was kind of I was like, man, I'm not going to do any Wonder Woman thing. And then and out of my bag I pulled out a rope dart, and I showed him a bunch of rope dart tricks. It's a weapon to pull horsemen off their horses. So then when I was doing the move, Rich was like, "Oh, get over here," in that voice. And so we all started laughing. But every time I hear that Get Over Here, that I was like, oh, that's, they're mimicking Kano. Because that's the voice. Yeah, that's the voice that Rich used to do when he was filming Kano. That's the voice that he would be using to Solomon.
That's pretty incredible.
Yes, yeah. So Get Over Here's a tribute to Rich.
Mind blowing. There was a small section where you were on your live feeds. I can't remember if it was Twitter or Facebook, so I apologize. Bobby actually had mentioned it to me, and there's still remnants of it on your Twitter, at least, regarding some series you were starting to work on called MK Secrets. Are there anything that you can tell us about that you can divulge with us?
MK Secrets. I know they used a lot of my videos that I posted. Man, there's as I said, there is a lot. A lot of I don't know about secrets, but the making of kind of thing. As I said, different things. Different fatalities, different. I'm trying to think of or how we came up with stuff. But yeah, it'll come to me. Is that what you were really referring to?
Kind of. There's been this part of me that's been sparked, my imagination, recently, especially with guys like John Parrish, yourself, showing up in convention circuits. And it's kind of nice that YouTube now, you can see these things that unless you're an attendee before, you didn't really have an opportunity to. And every time Marquez speaks, or yourself, or even John or Carrie, it always comes out like you guys are this little band of thieves that had discussed this underground garage kit sort of project. And what we see as fans is this huge phenomena, and that we're only familiar with from the idea of a giant production studio, right? But that's really not how it all started. And you guys all seem far more invested in it when you do speak than simply the guy that played 20 minutes of action. And I just find that fascinating. There's got to be a giant story behind all that, especially with it all. I hear about like pizzerias and gyms and things like that. It's really interesting. Yeah,
John would bribe me with pizza. Because we would be working long hours, or little known fact, Liz came up with the first friendship. We were going to figure out a fatality, and I was like, oh, it'd be cool if Liz gives you the kiss of death. And then Tobias was like, oh, kiss your hand and blow it blow it. And I was like, oh, John, then animate the lips like a butterfly, like making circles, and then as soon as it hits you, you go up in flames. And then John was like, okay, we're going to do that. And then Liz heard that and she was like, why do I have to kill anybody? Why can't we just be friends? Can't I just give them a flower and, not kill them? And we just started laughing. And later on, in number 2, they had friendships. But she was just like, yeah, I don't want to kill anybody. I just want to be their friend. Just really crazy things.
She also came from like a gymnastics background, didn't she? As opposed to martial arts, like many of you did?
Yeah, what happened was Tobias let me pick the people to be in the game, besides myself, Rich, and Carlos. So Liz worked at the health club that I worked at. I was a manager of a health club. She taught aerobics. But she looks like I picked her because, I seen her move, and she moved pretty good, and she actually looks like she can fight. Originally I didn't want any models because they look kind of delicate. They look too delicate, or they might look overly muscular.
Right.
So I wanted everyone to look like they can actually fight. So I picked her because of that. Same thing with Parrish. I picked him because he could actually. When I met him, I saw him like he's a big guy, and I saw him kick, and I saw him move around. I was like, oh, that guy looks like he can fight. You know, I can help him. I could at the time he took you know, a year of martial arts or something like that. But you know, I was like, oh, I could make him look like he can actually fight.
Yeah, you did a really good job with Liz, especially, and a lot of the other characters. I could tell as a kid, like the way that you and Raiden and some of the other ninjas moved, that they had a slightly different presence than some of the other ones. And
Yeah,
I didn't recognize that till years later.
Yeah. We tried to make sure that if you really watch close, you can see that the first four characters punch different and move different. They have different kicks or different things. Kind of that way, each one was a little bit different. Later on, for number two, after we filmed one, I kind of designed kind of a pattern. I taught John and Ed how to coach people or how to make them look like they can fight in case they needed to shoot something and I couldn't make it. Because again, they weren't paying me much. They weren't paying me much, and so I couldn't, take off of work all the time, and because I got to pay the bills, and so I was like, oh, I kind of taught them how to make like a cookie cutter, and I think later on for 3 and 4 they really did that, which I think it kind of hurt for me. It hurt the action of the game, because when everybody looks the same, except for a couple of special moves, they still look the same.
Okay, so what were you saying about all the fighters fighting the same?
Yeah, just later on, I think they have, they have them kind of fighting the same, but just make their special moves different. And I think that idea kind of took Mortal Kombat in a different direction than how we actually created it.
Right.
Yeah, it definitely did, because I noticed, I was actually joking around with my wife a little bit earlier ago about how your arm especially, Dan, when you were doing your uppercuts, most of the time the arm was thrust very high into the sky. There was almost no bend in the elbow. There was some, but there was a twist to the knuckle. But a lot of the other actors, when they were doing their uppercuts, it kind of looked like an extreme bicep curl. It was a little different than what I was used to from the first game.
Unfortunately, yes. It makes the action look not real. Mm-hmm. If you know a little bit about, even if you're a fan of just martial arts or boxing or MMA or anything like that, you can tell, you can be like, oh, that guy he knows how to kick or punch. Oh, that person is a model. So yeah.
Yeah, there were a couple of roundhouse kicks I remember seeing where it looked like the body was almost too stationary for a lot of it. So it was more like the leg rolling over. I don't know. Yeah. I imagine it was still hard to do. But
no, actually, John, for the models, for 3 and 4 and stuff like that, when they hired the models, would take the leg off and place it higher. So I think that made it look like, that's what it looks like. It looked like they took a low kick, they cut off the leg and placed it higher, graphically.
Oh, really? I didn't know that part.
Yeah, so, so a lot of it, when you see their, so a lot of it is that, because they didn't know how to kick, or they couldn't really kick. So they were like, oh, I'll just take the leg off, and put it in a higher position.
There's a lot of post-editing, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Okay, that's neat.
Yeah.
So I guess heading away from the Mortal Kombat and where things kind of go from there, I actually did a little bit of work trying to better understand where you came from and, of course, your brother and everything else. And I was shocked to find out that you and your brother were about 10 years apart, at least according to Wikipedia's information. And then that, your training began somewhere around the age of 12 and 13. I'm kind of curious 11. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Did that come from somewhere before you headed in that direction, or was it just something that your family decided to put you through, or how did that come about?
You know what? When I was younger, about 9 years old, my father and I would watch like movies together and things together, and because I have two older brothers, but they're much older than me, and then Carlos is 9 years younger than me. It really 8 in a few months. But anyway, I was watching an old series called Charlie Chan, Detective. And during one of the episodes, I recall him doing a judo throw on a guy. And I thought it was really, really cool. And my dad was like, oh, my dad served in the Army, and he served during the Korean War. And they taught him a little judo back then. And so my dad's like, oh, I can show you how to do that. And so my dad taught me my first throw. And I was just so intrigued with that. I kept on bugging my dad to take me to martial art class. But at that time, there was no kids class. You had to be like 13 years old to go into martial arts because it wasn't for kids. It was like serious business. Most of the people who taught the martial arts in America were ex-military who learned martial arts, from serving in the military and being stationed in Japan and Okinawa. So, I kept bugging. And when I was 11, my dad was like, you know what? I'm going to take this guy to learn martial arts, and I'm just going to lie about his age. So, my dad kind of took me to martial arts, and from there, I just kept studying it.
Were you the sort of the beginning of that in your family, or were your brothers part of it too, your older brothers?
Well, my older brothers tried out judo, and they lasted like 2 months. And I think that was another thing that my dad was like, you know what, I'm going to take him, because I was bugging him constantly about this. He was just like, I'm going to take this guy for judo lessons, and he's going to be just like his brothers, drop out in a month. Like 20 years later, one time my dad was just like, I thought you were going to just drop out. I didn't realize that you were going to be doing this your whole life.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and then Carlos followed suit.
Yeah, I trained Carlos since he was like 3. Basically, as soon as he could start kicking, I started training him.
Mm-hmm. It's neat too, because as you were saying about how the digitized actors were kind of getting away from the original intent and design somewhere around the 3-4 era. I had remembered Mocat from Deadly Alliance was your brother, really, and it was sort of a spoof on that character. And then I think some of the documentaries that came out around that time were discussing Carlos' specific influence at that point in time, doing most of the motion capture work for a variety of different fighting styles that they were introducing at that time. I guess trying to legitimize more of the combat elements of that. And I always thought it was neat because I knew that you had been part of that. I was still surprised to find out that, Carlos and you had such an age difference, considering most of the characters he played were older at the time.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Again, I think Carlos was an accident, my mom and dad's second honeymoon or whatever. So So again, it's just funny. It's part of life.
Mm-hmm.
Did you actors while you were training?
Can you repeat one more time, please?
Did you meet any of the future actors from Mortal Kombat while you were training? Again, as a kid, like.
Yeah, as I said, like. During that time when Carlos, I think, was about 13, 14, is when I met. I was actually teaching him in a park. Like, my parents lived by a park. So I was teaching Carlos in the park, and then all of a sudden, Rich stopped by, DIVIZIO, and he started learning from me. So a lot of the kids from the neighborhood started, training. I started training them.
That's really cool.
As I said, we knew I've known most of the people from MK1 and 2 way before the game came out.
So did you grow up with John Tobias and the others, like Young? What was it like living with these guys, now knowing, like, you guys must have a lot of mutual respect, but what were they like when they were younger?
We were all geeks. We would all get together, and even though there was that age difference, 8 or 9 year age difference, I collected comic books. My brother collected comic books. John collected comic books and drew. Sometimes we'd meet at Andy Kadolka's house, who was the guy who helped John draw the first MK comic book, and later on did the artwork for Nintendo, Mortal Kombat stuff on Nintendo. So we would go to his house, and they'd be drawing for a couple hours before we started playing Dungeons and Dragons, and then we'd all go to like movies together. It was like I had two sets of friends. I had my older friends who were like to go clubbing and stuff like that, but I was still always a geek at heart. So I would always do that, but at least once a week we'd be like, oh, we got to go see this movie. All these geeky, cheesy movies we would all get together and go see, whether they were, like E.T. or Indiana Jones or, Kung Fu movies. We as a group would go do that with the MK family friends. So, so they were constantly, I remember those guys constantly drawing, constantly sitting all at a table trying to, perfect their art.
Mm-hmm. The woman who had played Sonya, I forget her name from Mortal Kombat 1. Liz. Yeah. So she was part of this, I guess we could call it the Mortal Kombat Rat Pack?
No. Again, I met her, I knew her before we started NK because, she worked at the health clubs that I managed. Mm-hmm. So, when they were when finally we were ready to film, they were like, okay, we need a female. We at the beginning we already had planned to have a female and to have like a Jax type character, but really we didn't have anybody picked out for that yet. And then finally they were like, okay, who do you have we need the female now. And I was like, okay, I know a couple of women at the health club. Let me, talk to them, and then I'll bring them in for you guys to meet. And in the end, I just, I picked Liz, and I was like, okay, come meet these guys. And she's like, okay. So, they met Liz, and, she was athletic. She's basically in really good shape, athletic, looks like she could fight, and we just went with that.
Yeah, she actually had some very impressive moves in that first game. The whole scissor kick thing looks like that would have been a little challenging to do. I've seen some weird stuff, like when you guys do the jumps, how there were pictures taken while you're sitting on steps and things like that. I'm curious how some of that might have went down, especially when you would have to get these challenging moves that were either airborne or anything like that. Like, how did you guys come up with, I guess, the directions of the camera and what actually had to happen in order to make it work?
It is, that is craziness. Meaning what happened was because first thing, one time John called me up. We were supposed to film, some moves, and John called me up and said, hey, we can't film today. And I was like, hey, why not? He was like, John was like, I forgot to ask my father permission to use the camera. So we can't shoot today. So that's how low budget it was. So when we began filming, John and I and Ed cleaned up a storage area. We found a piece of flat wall, and us three cleaned it out to make room for it. And then that's when John and I started filming every move possible over 3 or 4 days, 8 hours a day. But during that time, because there was only overhead light, so there wasn't really, we didn't have a lighting kit or anything like that. We were using overhead light and desk lamps for lighting, trying to get some some proper lighting. So during that time, you know, I was like, well, you know, I put little marks on the floor, you know, so that way I could return to my point. And then John was like, well, you know, they could be bigger than that because they won't show up on our camera because it's so cheap. And so he drew like little stirrups. And I was like, well, if we're going to do stirrups, let's do a center line so that way I could stay on the center line. So then I put down tape for a center line. And then John was like, you know what? That's a really good idea. Let's mark boundaries. You know, you can only take 2 steps forward and 2 steps back. Otherwise, the lighting changes. And so if you ever look at behind-the-scenes footage, you'll see a little square. Actually, yeah, I kind of developed that. Not kind of. I did. I gave the ideas for that. You know, this is what we're going to do. So between John and I, we made these little stairs. These little things. So then we were filming, and I would jump up in the air, and John's like, wait a minute. He's like, you're jumping too high. You're jumping too high because the lighting makes your top of your head go dark because the lighting is mostly on the bottom. And so he's like, can you jump, but don't jump too high. And so I'm jumping, and after about 50, 60 jumps, he was like, man, you're jumping, can you kind of, what if you jump up and kind of, can you float or something? Kind of, is there a way where you can jump float? And I was like, really? I was like, you want me to float? You know, and he's like, well, we need to, you know, we got to figure something out. And then I was like, I saw stairs from a different game. And I was like, what if I jump and then I sit on those stairs and then you could cut me out of the stairs out and it'll look like, you know, I'm jumping. Because, you know, if I try to do it from a chair or something else, it just looks like you're sitting in a chair. You know, with the stairs, because it doesn't have a backing and you got to kind of, you could teeter on edge. You could give it a look like you're actually physically jumping and turning. Yeah. Hopefully you know what I mean. It gives you that, you know, because... Oh, yeah,
it's like flipped over and over again, like in the game.
Yeah, so then John was just like, yeah, and even today they use a staircase, which is like totally just, I thought of just because, you know, we couldn't get the shot that we wanted.
Super practical.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, please go ahead, Daniel.
No.
Just the thought in my head is, as you guys are filming and taking these pictures, all I can imagine is Richard quietly chuckling over in a corner, like not being able to help himself, and the rest of you guys having to bust up laughing over it. Like, this is the sort of guy that I see him as.
Yeah, he was, you know, because we would always be joking and we'd be the loudest people at Midway because, you know, you're an artist or you're a programmer, you're a little socially awkward, you know, but, you know, people were always stopping by to watch us film because they would just be, you know, laughing their ass off just because we were just a bunch of comedians and ribbing each other and, you know, over it. So it was just entertaining for everybody just to stop by.
Yeah. Have you ever seen...
Sorry, Luke. With Mortal Kombat 1, was Scorpion or Sub-Zero originally set to be the secret character, but then Reptile emerged as the secret character?
No, again, we didn't. They just told me that to shoot enough moves for 3 or 4 ninja characters. And again, before the Scorpion Sub-Zero, during the shooting of Raiden, which was the 3rd character, we were already talking about like having a secret character. You know, even though it never came out like that. Later on, I guess they just made it into Reptile. But originally, you know, that like these different concepts were they thought of having a secret character, you know, were thought of early on.
Mm-hmm.
with those secret characters that you guys worked on, how much of the content kind of happened almost by accident? I know, at least in my own creative process, I have noticed so many times some of the best creative work I've actually usually came out as a reaction to a problem or an obstacle. Like you mentioned about, the staircase having to be used in order to do some of these aerial moves and come up with out-of-the-box thinking in order to make certain things work. Like,
yeah,
was there some interesting things beyond that?
Yeah, almost the whole thing was like that. Almost the whole thing, was like, originally the combination, like the way the combos are.
Yeah.
Were originally we wanted to have like, you hit a set of buttons and the combo happens automatically as opposed to you working the combo.
Yeah.
But again, we tried to do that, where you had like, okay, at this point in the game, you're going to have this combination, and we used to call them beatdowns, where where you hit it and the guy literally just friggin' unwails on you, and then you fall to your knees, and then you give him and we always used to just call it, you're going to kill him, you're going to do the finishing move. And I think that, and later on, finish him came out of that, because we were all like, okay, we got to think of a finishing move, for each character. And, so again, that was happening when we were filming, and that's the terminology we used to describe the movement. And then later on, it came into the game. Afterwards, they're like, finish him. Yeah, we kept on goofing around filming, saying that, you got to finish him. So yeah,
the dizzy animation actually sounds interesting to me. Where did that come from?
Which one?
The animation for when they're dizzy before they're actually finished. Because in life, I've never seen that anywhere else. So.
Yeah. John came up with that idea. He's like, we have to make it look like you're on the brink of, you get dizzy, and that's when the beatdown comes. and then after the beatdown comes, he's on his knees, and then we're going to do a finishing move.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and again, John originally wanted the blood was going to be battle worn. So the blood was actually going to, when you get hit in the face a lot, all of a sudden your face is bloody. And when you get hit the body a lot, the clothes are torn.
So that's what you were talking about with MK9, how those ideas finally have found their way into that lore.
Yeah. So originally we wanted that, but we just didn't have the technology to do it. So, then later on, they were just like, man, it's too hard to do. We wanted blood in the game. Well, let's just add this, this blood just coming out, and forget about the bruising. So, those are, when we first were presenting the game to Midway and Ed, we wanted those things. So,
all these. Oh, sorry, Bobby. Go ahead.
Whose idea was Goro?
Goro is again. Most of the creation of I got to contribute. Carlos got to contribute. Rich got to contribute. Ed later on got to contribute. But really, the creator of Mortal Kombat is John Tobias. He wanted to, because again, we were geeky. We used to go to the drive-in, jump in my car. We'd go to the drive-in and watch those Ray Harryhausen animations. So that was a tribute to that. It was like a tribute to our childhood of going to see that, seeing the Sinbad movies where they're, you got the claymation. So John really wanted to have one of the monsters be like a claymation monster, and Goro was that.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's all a tribute to our childhood.
Did it take long to do the filming with the Goro claymation figure you guys had?
It was a pain in the ass for John, because John did that all. He did the stop motion for that, and Goro would not, because of his 4 arms, he couldn't stand by himself. they had to stick a pencil in them, and manipulate them like that. So, John would spend, hours making the animation for that, filming it and creating that.
Yeah, I bet that got pretty frustrating.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he's really, he's a genius, basically.
Yeah, he's a very cool character. I mean, even in the new Mortal Kombat series, he's a lot of fun to fight with. Just to me, 'cause he's so classic and cool.
Yeah.
We had talked a bit about the blood and sweat that had to go into making these games. I'm kind of curious about the tiers, the part in the development, especially the first bit, where it was just like the stress that it took to overcome some of these challenges. Like, was there ever a point where you and Sean and some of the other people were sitting there wondering, is this going to get off the ground? Are we going to be able to make this happen?
Well, I guess where there's a will, there's a way, and two, it's that creative team. So it wasn't it never was a question of getting it done. It was more of a question of getting it done the way we wanted. Like originally we wanted most of the characters to look like rotoscoping.
Rotoscoping?
Yeah, like from the Ralph Bakshi did Lord of the Rings back in the day, and we were a fan of him. He used to have these orcs who were really real people, and he kind of put artwork over them.
Mm-hmm.
So originally we wanted to do that, but we didn't have the technology or the money to do that, and that's where later on there, because there were 5 programmers for the first game. So after we were done filming and creating this stuff, we would give it to one of them, and John was like, "Hey, I wanted to kind of program to look like rotoscoping." So I think the guy Mike, but I forget his last name, stayed up for like 3 or 4 days and created this program to make it look like it looked, and then we just labeled it digitized. So it was like not even ever planned to look like it was going to look different, but because we didn't have the money or technology, it looked like it did back then, and they just gave it a name, digitized.
Yeah. I don't know how you guys managed to do that. That technology, I was telling my wife, it didn't really exist in a large format at that time. I mean, to be pioneering with John's dad's, recorder and, a few guys that you guys knew growing up, it's really incredible to see where it's gone.
Yeah, there's, like I said, it was just like us, we would be creating on the spot or trying to, we would try to be, with fatalities, we were always trying to one-up each other. First fatality, I was like, man, it'd be really cool if I could punch somebody's head off. And then Rich came in and he's like, oh, you know what? I want to, reach in, grab your heart and eat it. And then John was like, hey, we can't really have you eating somebody's heart. So, just hold it up. And then, I was just like, yeah, but it'd be cool too if, when you hold it up, it's beating like an Indiana Jones. So, we did it. So everything was always trying to either joke or one-upping. Like a good example too is like when we were John was like, I want Scorpion to spit fire, and then I looked at John and was like, no, he can't spit fire because if he spits fire, his mask will be on fire, his head will be burning. So then Rich was like, well, that'd be cool if he takes off his mask and he's a skeleton underneath it. So just us goofing around with that, that's how, things came up, from spitting flames, but no, you can't spit the flames because your head will be on fire. Oh, that'd be cool if your head's on fire and it's a skeleton. That's just, we just started creating stuff like that.
Yeah.
What's your favorite fatality from Mortal Kombat 1 then? Or do you not really have a favorite?
I like the Sub-Zero ripping your head off. Just because
with the spine dangling down.
Yeah, just because that action, actually grabbing somebody and pulling it, and we made sure that if you see the way we did it back then and how it's done now, it's totally different. Back then it was like, when we came up with that idea, I imagined Predator, and I remember one scene in Predator how he grabs it and lifts it straight off, and I was like, wow, if you're going to rip somebody's head off with the spine, it's impossible, but that would be the way to do it if you were really fast. Because if you're really quick and snatch it and pull it upward, you could probably get that, maybe. But, if you just grab it and pull it out, kind of outward, you're not going to get the spine. You're just going to rip the head off. So that's the way I did it, like Predator would do it.
That's really neat. Do you have a least favorite fatality? I know a lot of people disagree with me, but I cannot stand Liu Kang's fatality in Mortal Kombat 1.
Oh, the dragon?
No, he does a little spin kick and then like a super uppercut.
Oh, the butterfly kick, yeah.
He's my favorite character of all time, and I just cannot stand that fatality in Mortal Kombat 1. I know it's in 2 as well, but I mean, at least you have other fatalities in that one.
Yeah, again, Ho-Sung wanted to do that. It was the last character we shot, was Liu Kang in Mortal Kombat 1. And by then, I think most of the cooler stuff was already done. So he was trying to think of something cool, and he was like, well, I can't really, punch somebody's head or rip your heart off, or, I'm not going to give you a kiss of death. And so he was just like, oh, I'm going to do a butterfly kick and then uppercut. And we were like, okay, we're running out of time. Let's just shoot that.
Huh.
Yeah, Liu Kang took about, Johnny Cage really he's the father of all characters because he kind of laid the path and he did all the action that the other characters did. So he really took, I would say overall probably maybe like 14, 15 days of filming, 8 hours a day in total.
Wow.
And then Liu Kang took 6 hours because we already knew what would work and what wouldn't. So, the progression, Kano took like 4 days to shoot. Raiden took like 3 days to shoot. Sub-Zero and Scorpion really took 2 days to shoot, and then another half day for me to film enough characters for a bunch of ninjas. Liz took like a day and a half to shoot, and then finally when we got to Ho-Sung, it took like 6 hours to shoot, basically, 1 day of shooting.
Yeah, I saw an image that you had of Ho-Sung's original fireball move for Liu Kang and how close it was to Johnny Cage's, I forget the name of it actually suddenly, but the force ball that he would throw. The change in design.
Yeah, a lot of it is like, Johnny Cage, when we were doing stuff, again, there was remember Big Trouble in Little China? There was a character called Egg Chen who was a wizard. And one time when they're walking the sewers, a monster comes out and he pulls some magic out of his 9-demon bag and throws it at the monster and it disappears. So when actually I was going to shoot, like they were hurling energy, I was like, wow, if you're going to really hurl energy, it'd be cool if it's like alchemy, like Egg Chen. So that's why if you really look at MK1, I reach behind my back and I pull alchemy out of a little pouch in the back and then I throw it. So that's inspired by Egg Chen.
I had never noticed that before. I knew the move had changed, but that's not something I had noticed.
Yeah, and then in the second one, the energy ball is from there's a poster of Jet Li in a movie called Shaolin Temple, and he is doing that move, and that's my tribute to. And I'm a big Jet Li fan, so that was my tribute to Jet Li, is him throwing the force ball like that. Yeah, like there's a lot of things, like Reptile spits acid, because when we came up with the character Reptile and would be a playable character in MK2, they were like, well, we need a special move for Reptile. And then I thought of Amazing Spider-Man, when Amazing Spider-Man, the anime series, he's fighting Doctor, the lizard. A doctor turned into a lizard. He was spitting acid at Spider-Man. So I was like, oh, he's got to spit acid just like, the lizard in Spider-Man, the Amazing Spider-Man anime series. So, a lot of it is, that type of thing where it just resonated. Like, oh, it's got to be like this because of this comic book or that,
Yeah. There was stuff that each one of you had brought to the table. I was talking to Bobby earlier, and you and Tony, I think, were both working together on the convention circuit. And Tony had mentioned something about his love for Clint Eastwood movies. And then the development of Kung Lao's more mysterious look kind of comes out of something that really came from Tony, as opposed to, anywhere else. All of you brought something like that. John Parrish's character, the mass, and some of the stuff that he had come up with there. All of you had something to contribute that way.
Yeah, really the characters, are really part of us. It's part of our personality. It's part of us. So, Carlos is the luckiest one because he has Christopher Lambert trying to portray him, my brother, because my brother, developed that Raiden personality. So it's kind of cool to see, paid actors trying to act like us.
Yeah. For sure. Especially your character, or at least the one you're most well known for, from Johnny Cage.
Yeah. Yeah, they're again, it's very cool. I like that stuff.
As you guys moved away from Mortal Kombat, the original crew of those that you had grown up with, were there other projects that you worked on together or considered collaborating on again that either didn't come up or maybe that we're just not aware of?
Well, we did. Well, out of Mortal Kombat, I did an ad for Bloodstorm, which is actually John and Ed called me in the office, and I thought we were going to be talking about a different game. They're like, oh, hey, can you stop by in the office? I want to talk to you about a game. So I came to the office, and John and Ed were there, and they're like, hey, remember Leaf, the guy who, there's a guy who he loved Johnny Cage, man. He would just, like, whenever I filmed, he was there, like, watching it. He's supposed to be working, but he's watching me film. He was just a big Mortal Kombat fan. Well, he got a job with a different company, and they were like, hey, remember Leaf? He got a job with a different company. He wants you to shoot an ad for him. He goes, but you can't you can't wear exactly Johnny Cage stuff. You're going to have to change it up because, Midway owns that character. So both of them helped me get that job. But that was around the time when I started, originally we did 200 games. We were signing up for 200 video games. So when they made more, I was like, hey guys, it made, you guys are making like over 10,000 games. You only said it was going to be 200 games. And John and Ed would both be like, hey, don't worry, you're going to get a bonus. And then it went to home. And then I was like, hey guys, now this is a totally different format. It's going to home. And then John and Ed would be like, don't worry, we're going to give you a bonus for that too. So we started working on number 2, and I didn't see a bonus yet. And at the end of 2, I was like, started asking them, hey guys, you owe me a bonus for number 1, and now we're going to be number 2. I need to, if you guys aren't going to pay me, I'm not going to work on any more MK games. So basically, that's when they came up with a new contract. They wanted to pay me like $3,000 and me to sign the rights to my image away. So I was like, you know what? Now I'm not going to do that because I know you guys all made, I think the lowest bonus was $3 million and the highest bonus $12 million. And I wasn't seeing any of that. So I was just like, I'm going to not work on MK again. But then Midway came out with a story like, oh, he got fired because he did Bloodstorm. But in reality, that wasn't the case. It was just like doing that. And then shortly after that, because Ho-Sung's like, well, if we're not going to get paid, I'll try to find a developer and we're going to do some games for a different company. So he went and joined Jaguar, the Jaguar system. So we did shoot some stuff for that, but I think at that time Jaguar just went under, and Sega, Nintendo, Sony took over, Nintendo took over.
Yeah, it got really complicated, especially during that era when they were switching out from what we know, me and Bobby growing up, was 16-bit era. When it was moving on to what do we do next, there was a lot of, I saw that image of you and I followed that forever with the whole Nintendo PlayStation. It's just such a bizarre element of history. But every video game empire that we had known for so long, they were all gobbling each other up and it was changing so fast. Yeah,
everybody's trying to, it's a new technology, it's a new era, and, people are, if you didn't have enough invested, you were not going to survive.
Yeah. Daniel, I have to, thank you, honestly. There's a lot of that era where we start seeing the people who were originally involved in that game start to disappear. And I know it's not always easy to talk about, and it's other people's stories too. So I really appreciate you opening up about that Bloodstorm, because it's obviously in the back of my head, but I really didn't know the details that were behind that.
Yeah, it's, it's a lot of people are like, oh, he that's why he got fired. In reality, no, I didn't. It was at the point where I was just, I'm not going to work for you guys for free anymore. You guys got my ideas, and, you promised me stuff and, you're not going to, and then later on they were like, well, you never had a written contract, so we don't have to pay you for it. So in the end, Midway screwed all of us, except for, except for the people who actually work for it, like, John Ed, John Bogle, the other guys who worked on the game got a hefty bonus, and the guys who were on the ground floor who didn't work for Midway got screwed.
Yeah. Oh. And Bobby, did you want to ask anything about that before I go on to something else?
No, I think I'm pretty good on that. Yeah, you can go ahead.
So, there's that era where I've been very curious about, and I certainly don't want to ask you anything that, just let me know if we need to change direction a little bit. But especially with John, after you guys had left, most of the original cast, John, he kind of disappeared from Mortal Kombat as well, but not immediately. After Mortal Kombat 3, when, you had kind of moved on and there were other things going on, John kind of did too within the company. He decided to start going towards the adventure route, and then he just quietly vanished from something that, we had known all along that John, and as you had mentioned, John and Ed are constantly spoken about as creators of this content, right?
Well, too, John didn't want to do MK2. Mm-hmm. John was like, I want to do a different game. He's like, I already created the best fighting game ever, and how am I going to top that? So for John, it was more about the creativeness than the money. But Ed coming in later and being the company guy really was like, oh, no, we have to do two. He was like, because that, and then John was like, when we were talking about two, John was like, you know what? I don't want be around if they're going to make me do MK like 5. Because
Yeah.
it's already way too, you know, they can do it. They have all, you know, my ideas. They can just do it. You know, later on, I know John wanted to come back to the company and do different games after he left. And basically, you know, the management said no, they didn't want him, that they already had his creation, that they didn't really need him. And I think that was more of the management part, you know, because again, it's not like today where there's social media where you know, if somebody really creates something now, it's hard to not give them credit, and it's easy for, you know, and it's hard for people who didn't do the work to snatch up the work. But back then, you know, management snatched up the whole creation, you know. It's, you know, no offense, but you got the guy in charge of Mortal Kombat who didn't think that Mortal Kombat was a good idea.
Yeah.
So you...
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
Are you friends with Ed Boon then?
No. Again, because Ed was for me, Ed was the boss of MK, and he should have taken care of us, being the boss and making the verbal promises for us to get a bonus, and knowing too that, you know, he knows he didn't actually create the game in the way that it's pitched. He did help program the game, and he did, you know, this stuff, but he didn't come up with, like, you know, you think like, oh, he's the one who started it. No, he heard our ideas and said no to them, and later on was like, oh, okay, you guys work on the game, and then once it was doing well, he you know, he's not lying when he says he created it, but I think he's misleading people. So again, you know, it's just, you know, I am a little, you know, mad at him for that, you know, and two, it's like, you know, it is, yeah. So yeah, I don't really talk to him or anything like that, just because of, you know, of the way it turned out. You know, I don't know if it's bitter. You know, people might say, oh, it's bitter, but no, it's more like, you know, you can't really trust a guy like that.
No, when somebody burns you, you're out.
Yeah, because guess what? It is that, you know. And now here he is in charge of it, and guess what? It's cool, you know. Happy he's in charge of it, but you know, it's a little misleading.
Well, I mean, with, you know, they have Mortal Kombat X on mobile, which has a huge fan following, and it doesn't really seem like they take care of the mobile app the way they should. So,
yeah, I think when they lost John, they lost a lot, because he is like the creator. You know, if they had John back, it would probably go in as long as they listened to him, it would go in a decent direction. You know, you know, for 3, I had some ideas to change it up in 3 that never, to kind of grow the franchise in more of a fantasy type of martial art world, you know, as opposed to what it looks like now. But anyway, that's, you know.
That's actually a really interesting point to make too, because the way the narrative changed, and I was talking to Bobby about this. I grew up in a slightly different area than he did because of our age is about 5 years. But 5 years is a big deal when it comes to the specific history, because I was there for Mortal Kombat 1, 2, 3, and what they did with that. And then when you guys were gone, even if somebody didn't mention it, there was very little headlines on where you went or what John was up to. They'd have little articles maybe that had 1 paragraph or 2 paragraphs assigned to that story. But then you get into Mortal Kombat 4, and you get into the Deadly Alliance era through Armageddon, and you have so much more money thrown at the project itself, but somehow, despite all the work that has to go through, the entire narrative feels much more shallow. like it's tacked on.
Yeah, because they didn't, they lost the creator. So, and then you got, I think that's part of that whole, midway cutthroat environment that they had. Again, when we went in, we went in to film at 10:30 at night, so nobody would steal John's idea of doing a fighting game. He didn't want us to come in during regular hours. We kind of basically snuck in to do that because that midway was notoriously. I don't know about other companies, but it was notorious for people, stealing your ideas or taking credit for your stuff.
Yeah, I believe it. There's a lot of even cross. I don't know what you would call it, cross theft, but there's a lot of midway games that borrow from other midway games, even.
Yeah, they're kind of it's this. That's the environment that it's in, and that management, that midway management has. So again, I think that was their design to, someone's design was to get rid of everybody who really created it and then have a false legacy.
Yeah. How do you and your brother ever talk about not about all the controversy and stuff, because that's important, but when it comes to the game and what it's doing now, is that something that you and Carlos sit down and talk about sometimes?
I'm not really. I try to help. No, I try to. If he's like, I need to learn something, because again, he is more like an artist. He was a lead animator and design artist. So he doesn't practice martial arts as much as I do, because that's what I do all day long. So a lot of times he's like, hey, I want to do, when they had Drunken Style in it, I taught him Drunken Style. When they have when they tried to put weapons in the game, I taught him how to do all these weapons. So we do mostly that. But I know it's sometimes, I know from working there, the environment is difficult. I know for sure, MK succeeded because you let the martial art guy come up with all the martial arts. You let the guy who created it have free reign on the story and the artwork and how it's going to look. You let the programmers, take the ideas that, the martial art guy and the artist guy have and program it. So everybody kind of back then had their place. But I know now you have now you have people who don't know martial arts, saying how the martial arts should be. So that's craziness, It's kind of like, what? But, once you get money, you can do that. Even, because they can throw money at any problem they had.
Yeah. There's a small project that I found very interesting that you and your brother kind of worked on for a little while. I'm going to botch this, so I apologize, but I think it was called Tattoo Warriors. Am I right on that?
Yeah. Ho-Sung kind of, not kind of, but yeah, Ho-Sung took the lead on those games. He kind of reached out to people and tried to get other games to work on, because he really, he was like, man, it's a good, it's a growing market. It's good to invest in that. So he would be like, oh, let's try this or that. But again, if I don't, it's awesome that he did that. But again, I think not, just using our name wasn't enough. For any game. If people contact me sometimes like, hey, can I use it for a game? And I was like, you know what? If you're going to just use me, and you can get any martial artist to do martial art moves. What I am really good at is you want to let me create the fighting system. like I did for MK1 and 2. You know, they're still basically doing what I created, you know, for 10. Injustice, when I see Injustice, I kind of smile because I see my work in that. You know, ideas I came up with to do that, like different things. Like I'm kind of like, oh man, that, you know, that's part of you know what I left, my legacy that I left for fighting games. So, you know, I think that is what's lacking, is letting, you know, the guy best suited for the job do it, and not just some guy who, you know, who is really doesn't know it, you know, who just kind of doesn't really get it, be in charge of it. Politics.
And it's obvious when it happens. You know, I don't know anything about fighting. Like, well, that's not true. I started learning more about it when I was around 18 and 19. But even as a kid, I could see it, especially Mortal Kombat 4 comes around and it just looks like a bunch of dolls being smashed together. You know, it looks very weird. And it gets a little bit more authenticity, especially when your brother's starting to do some of the moves for Deadly Alliance and that. But even still, there's an obvious lack of cohesion. I guess that might actually be a good word to use, because where you guys made everything look real in the beginning, it became more obvious when you could see some people were and some people weren't doing what's real anymore.
Yeah. Too, I think because the franchise was so successful that people thought, like, oh, I'm going to create Mortal Kombat, when they don't realize that it's already created, that, you know, they should get it in their mindset that they're contributing to the game, not, oh, I'm going to create Mortal Kombat. No, dude, sorry, 4 guys already created that, you know, and presented it to Midway, you know, so they, you know, and it did well for the first 2 games because people would contribute to it and not be like, oh, I'm the creator of it. No, you can't create something that's already created, you know, and I think they forget that and try to put in their own kind of version of it, which is not the version that it's already created, so it kind of gets messed up.
Yeah, and that happens actually in a lot of things. Totally unrelated to Mortal Kombat. One of the games that I loved growing up was Mega Man. You know, Keiji Inafune was a part of that, and I know that Mighty Number 9 was a project that he had worked on when he left, but when he was gone, that series canned. It disappeared. There were 2 or 3 titles that had come out here and there, and they just didn't have the same sort of legwork that they had before.
Yeah. Yes, once the creator goes, you know, I think that, you know, it sounds weird, but there's some kind of spirit in your work when you do artwork that translates to people. You know, especially when, from Mortal Kombat, the original Mortal Kombat, a lot of people, like, there's this energy with it. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, it really, people really are like, can tell that stuff. You know, and then when you don't have it and when you're just doing it for the money, I think people know that, you know.
If we can move, I guess, beyond the Mortal Kombat a little bit, I think one of the more compelling questions that we had when we were talking about doing this program was how this character or the events that had happened in Mortal Kombat influenced you as a person and helped develop you as you move towards something else. And what are some of your proudest achievements since this time?
Well, naturally, like, for me, a long time ago, I chose this, like, martial art as a way of life. So basically, I have continued absorbing that, you know, practicing martial arts, teaching martial arts. Basically, you know, it is the biggest part of my life. So, you know, thankful that I got to do MK and show some of that martial arts mixed in with the geekiness. But you know, that's martial arts is what I do.
do you ever find, outside of the controversial elements, are there ever times where you kind of feel like the character that you had played in the 90s has sort of dominated aspects of your life that you wouldn't have wanted it to?
Well, for, because like Johnny Cage, Scorpion, and Sub-Zero are part of they're not completely my personality, but they are part of my personality. Just like Kano is, Rich is. You ever hang out with Rich, you'd be like, holy shit, he is really Kano, because Kano is Rich. Same thing with Raiden is my brother, and Ho-Sung is. It's part of our personalities that triggered that story along that line. So having that, whenever I see it, it's just like part of. It is part of me, so I never kind of regret that. I just kind of for a while I didn't do anything, like didn't go to events. Got invited to a couple other events, and I would not go just because I was like, Mortal Kombat screwed me. So I really wanted to be like, just stay away from it. But eventually just talking to, people, they're like, man, we didn't know all this stuff about Mortal Kombat. We always thought that it was like, Midway's baby and stuff like that. We didn't know that it was a group of geeks who just kind of, got together and made this game. So, hopefully I answer your question. So it's just kind of, it is, those characters are such a part of me that I never view it as a different, something to regret, because then you just kind of regret yourself.
That makes sense.
So, yeah. So, I wish I would have just been smarter and got everything in writing, as opposed to just trusting your friend. In the end, he couldn't, he couldn't really watch out for us. He got kind of, I heard he got threatened, saying that he wouldn't, if he sided with us, that he would not be working in the industry.
That's harsh.
Yeah. It is harsh.
Regretful to hear that, man. What are you working on? Anything right now that you want other people to know about at this point?
I'm working on a couple things, but nothing solid yet. We'll see.
Okay, great.
It's been a couple people have kicked around the idea of doing another fighting game. So in the retro style. So
I hope the hell that works.
I told them that as long as we kind of use my vision of where MK3 would have gone if they would have not disbanded the group. I thought that would be, if they allow me to do that part of the creation of it, I would consider it. So we'll find out.
Well, I'm sure you're going to have an eager fan base the moment it does happen.
Yeah, I think the fighting community would be like, oh wow, that's a fresh idea.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have anything scheduled with the original cast? Did Galloping Ghost Arcade anytime soon?
I know they want to have another Combat Con. I'm going to, Rich and I are, this weekend are going to Mogaine Con down in Missouri, right outside of St. Louis. Then Rich, Tony, and I, and Liz, Sonia, are going to Game On Expo, an event in Phoenix, Arizona. We got some events coming up. I'll be going to Brazilian Game Show which is a big convention, like 350,000 people or 400,000 people, something crazy like that.
Wow.
It's a big one. And also going to Punta Arenas in Chile, which is at the southernmost tip of South America, right before you get to the friggin' South Pole. So I'll be doing an event way out there. So yeah, this stuff keeps me busy. Again, if anybody has any connections with any events, you can contact me, through Facebook or anything like that. And or if got a couple of spin-off ideas coming out. So people should be hearing about that. Probably by the end of the year, we'll have something solid.
That sounds pretty damn good to me.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
Yeah, it should be fun.
So we got to ask people if they had any questions for you since we're moving to the end here. And I had a couple of questions for you that people wanted to know.
Okay.
One of them was, among all the characters you played, which was your favorite?
Yeah, I really like the Johnny Cage character is my favorite because he is the father of all MK characters. Again, we shot him first. He did all the, with him, we really shaped the franchise of Mortal Kombat. So that character is, it's for me, it's something to be proud of, because there would be no other Mortal Kombat characters if it wasn't for Johnny Cage.
Right. Our next one here is, was the punch to the groin your idea?
No, John wanted to do it. John wanted to do it making fun of Jean-Claude Van Damme. He was like, he's like, it would be really cool if you would, you can do the splits, slide into the splits and punch somebody in the nuts. That would be really cool. So I must have did that move 50, 60 times in different positions till it finally came out the way it came out, which is a pain in the ass. But it was cool. But it's cool. But it was kind of cool because, a lot of people are like, oh, can you do that? And I'm like, yeah, I actually did that, I had to slide down in slow motion because, again, the camera was cheap and we couldn't do any movement quick because the image would come out blurred. So, we had to do every, that's why even the jump, can you jump slower or can you float? No, because, it's like, yeah, it's crazy stuff. But yeah, I didn't come up with that. John Tobias, came up with that.
Okay, here's a good one I'm interested in. Who is your favorite character you played in any movie you've been in?
I like to play bad guys. Just kind of like, any character where I'm the evil guy, only because in order for you to have a believable good guy, you have to have a really, really believable bad guy. So with my experience in martial arts, it lets me be kind of more ruthless as opposed to looking like, just like a brawler. It makes it look, when your martial art is calculating, it makes it look more evil. So I did a couple of independent movies, and I really like to be the evil guy.
That's pretty cool. I never would have look at it from that perspective.
Yeah.
And another one here I like to, were weapons originally supposed to be in Mortal Kombat 1?
We had filmed some moves of Richard using his knives for special moves and fatalities. But it just didn't, timing didn't work out. Originally, we were going to have a couple of different special moves and a couple of different fatalities. So each one wasn't going to have just one. They were going to have a couple of ways to do things.
Nice. And you were in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles too, correct? As a
Yeah,
foot
I did stunts for like the bad guys in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2. That's awesome.
That's really awesome.
It was really fun to shoot. Kind of hard work because when the guys in the turtle costume, they can't really see where they're kicking. So we would have to, when they would kick, we would have to read the kick and get in front of the kick or punch to sell it. So it's kind of cool how that process works.
I got a goofy question about that since you were in that movie.
Yeah.
Did you get to meet Vanilla Ice for being in the movie?
Yeah, he was on set with us.
Pretty nice guy.
He seemed okay. We didn't interact a lot because he had his part to do while we were doing the fighting, so we didn't get to. For the week he was out, we didn't get besides on the set, working on the set, there wasn't too much interaction directly.
Did you do a lot of stunt doubling in that movie?
I would say 80% of the fights I'm in.
Wow.
That's pretty fantastic. What was it like choreographing Ninja Rap?
Actually, it was pretty fun. It was pretty fun.
How'd you get set up with that whole gig for that movie?
I was at a tournament called Battle of Atlanta, and they were recruiting people there. Then TSUNG got picked for Turtle, and then he was just like, oh, that guy would make a really good villain, stunt villain. Because again, in order for the good guy to look good, the bad guy has to be pretty good, at being bad. So they were like, okay, yeah, we're going to take him too.
That's cool. Somebody they'll definitely see it in a new perspective now.
Yeah, it was fun times.
I don't think I have any more questions. Jacob, you got any more before we get off here?
Are you kidding me? I could take all of Daniel's time to the end of the time. But what I have to say is that I just can't tell you how much you've made my day. And I'm sure Bobby feels the same way. It's been fantastic to follow you through this history that we just don't get the opportunity to see very much, including some of the raw information that just doesn't get a lot of circulation. I appreciate you for being so honest and straightforward with us about all of the things that you've went through, and I can't wait to find out more about you as time goes on. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you today and just get to know more about this process. It's been really an honor.
Wow, yeah, thanks for having me on, and thanks for taking the time to interview me and learn about this game. Hopefully the people out there will learn something a little bit about this game and inspire them to go out and create, because in the end, that was really the success of this franchise. Was a bunch of geeky guys just getting together to create a video game.
Thank you so much. Everybody in the community, be aware that Master Pesina is on Facebook and Twitter. He's constantly putting out new content about some of the crazy elements of this fandom that we all love so much. And you get to find out what sort of conventions he's going to be on, as well as some interesting projects that may be up in the future. Thank you so much for coming on to the program.
That's all the time we have for 1.0. I'd like to thank Master Daniel Pesina for joining us, and also for Jacob Hoffman as well. We'll see you next time.